Welcome to another episode of Light in the Dark podcast. I am your host, Lady B. Before I venture into today's topic, I want to stress that I am not a counselor, therapist, psychologist, etc. of any kind, licensed or otherwise. I am none of those. I am a regular person who is pointing out a few things and giving you my opinions pertaining to those things. If you need a therapist, etc., then please, by all means, seek a therapist, etc. There is no shame in getting your mental health together. And that is the end of my disclaimer. During this season, I will be doing a series on church hurts. But before the guest and I get into that, I wanted to give you a quick episode titled Problematic Pastors. They get up in a pulpit and talk down to people and sprinkle some Jesus on it to make it seem like it's part of the gospel. People in the congregation need to understand that once Jesus gave his life on the cross and the Holy Spirit showed up, then we have our own personal relationship with the Lord. That's what it's about. Yes, the pastor is supposed to help guide you, but when you have your own relationship with the Holy Spirit, then you will understand that not everything the pastor says is biblical. People are getting up in the pulpit giving the congregants false doctrine, and some congregants be out in the pews yelling, "Preach, pastor." So before I get started, I want to go on record saying that not all clergy men, clergy women are problematic. But just like any other quote unquote profession, there are some bad apples in the bunch. People, myself is definitely included in what I'm about to say next. People put ministers, pastors, preachers, friars, rabbis, chaplains, monsignors, so on and so forth, anyone in the pulpit with a title, on a pedestal, so to speak. We tend to ignore the fact that they are human and are fallen beings just like the rest of us. So let's get started. During a Father's Day sermon, one pastor once said that, quote, "We are raising women to be men," end quote. Also, he said that women, quote, "are climbing the corporate ladders, but we are losing our families," end quote. By we, I think it's safe to say that he was speaking about society is losing the family unit. Anyways, he went on to say that women treat men as if they are dispensable, and that how women feel and treat men is, quote, "born out of pain because we hurt you and betrayed you and lied to you and cheated you, and you became like you became out of pain," end quote. I believe he meant to say cheated on you, but I digress. He goes on to say that women should insist for better out of the man that they are with instead of replacing the man. So here's my problem with that. At no point in time did I hear him hold the men accountable for anything that they have done. At no point in time did I hear him say, "Men, we should treat our women better. We shouldn't lie to them, or hurt them, or cheat on them, or betray them," or any of the many things that he listed the men had done to hurt women. At no point in time did I hear him hold the men accountable for society losing our families. So, I repeat, at no point in time did he hold men accountable for anything. If I gathered anything from his sermon, I stress the words his Father's Day sermon, was that women should accept what men do to them, but insist that men do better. But don't replace them when they aren't doing better or aren't even attempting to do better. Here's what I've come to recognize about some men, not all, but some. A woman can try her hardest to hold a man accountable for something or insist that he does whatever, but it will go in one ear and out of the other. Now, take that same man and let another man tell him the exact same thing his woman told him. Then he's more apt to listen to it. When one man holds another man accountable, then things change. So how dare this pastor stand up in the pulpit and give that speech that he gave? It reminded me of when Adam blamed Eve for him eating the fruit. Adam had a choice, and the Lord gave the instructions to Adam. Sin didn't enter the world until Adam ate the fruit, not when Eve bit into the fruit. So ever since creation, men have been blaming women for things. Imagine that. So, in my opinion, the healing comes when the pastors take their flesh out of the sermon and let the Holy Spirit take over. If they want to express how they feel about a situation, that's fine. Just don't do it in a sermon. Don't do it in your official capacity with the title. Do it as a layperson. Preachers have influence. It's dangerous to influence parishioners and congregants from your flesh. So let's move on to next on the list. Another pastor I find to be problematic, he and his wife, is a pastor who stepped outside of his marriage, physically or not, who knows, but definitely emotionally. That is problematic when you're in the pulpit preaching about the sanctity of marriage and is possibly leading couples counseling for church members. But what's even more problematic to me is the lack of accountability on his part and on his wife's part. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm definitely not saying that his wife should be held accountable for him making a choice to connect with another woman. I'm saying he and his wife put the blame on the woman he was pursuing. His wife equated him to being a child and that this woman took advantage of him. No, ma'am. Your husband was a grown man. He was not a child. He wasn't held accountable for his decisions by his wife. Publicly, the wife blamed the other woman for it all. Publicly, the wife never held her husband accountable. To me, that was a missed opportunity because after that, people, myself included, were looking at her sideways. Then when he got caught again, and that was also brought to the public, once again, he's not being held accountable. I don't fault anyone for staying in a marriage when the spouse is cheated. But what I am saying is that people need to be held accountable. Stop always blaming the outside person for when someone steps out of the covenant they have with someone else. The person who strays made a choice. It was their choice and their decision alone. So to me, the healing comes when the pastor takes time away from the pulpit, and if he's sincere about keeping his family together, then he needs to truly focus on that. Figure out what made him stray to begin with. Also, he and his wife need counseling, but not from anyone in church. They need a counselor who isn't biased and one who will hold the wife and the husband accountable for each of their own actions. The wife needs to figure out why she chose not to hold her husband accountable for his actions and instead blamed everything on the woman. Next. One Sunday, this pastor got up in the pulpit to tell his congregation his truth. He told the church that he had committed adultery and he asked them for their forgiveness. What made him come forward with this whitewashed truth after so many years, who knows? The pastor tried to minimize what happened and he led their congregation to believe that it was something that had happened once and that the person it happened with was an adult. But what I do know is that the victim, who was a teenager at the beginning of this, was in the congregation that same Sunday. Now, whether or not she has still been attending that church even after everything had ceased, I don't know. But again, what I do know is that she told the whole story. She told them that it wasn't just once, but that it had lasted several years. The fact that the pastor tried to minimize what he'd done was problematic. The fact that the congregation huddled around him afterwards, kind of like, oh, pastor, it'll be okay, was problematic because those same people huddled around the victim the same way, saying the same thing to her. To me, by the pastor minimizing what he'd done, gave me the impression that he didn't really see it as a big deal. So once again, I wonder what made him come forward. So the healing, in my opinion, the healing comes by way of therapy. For a pastor, why did he feel the need to seek out a teenager? If he wanted to have an affair, why choose a teen girl? Why not choose an adult woman? Don't get me wrong, I'm not condoning his affair. But I do know that when one has an affair, it is a choice that one makes to do so. A choice that he or she is solely responsible for. The traumatized teenage girl who is now a traumatized woman needs therapy as well. Her innocence and her virginity were taken as a teen by a person in an authoritative role that she trusted. There's years and years of trauma inside of her that needs to be dealt with. On a positive note, kudos to her husband. To know the trauma that she'd experienced and to be able to deal with the residual effects of what occurred, that takes a lot. So my prayers go out to everyone involved in that situation. Now let's keep moving. Now this pastor has a history of sexual relationships with female members of his congregation while he was married and after his divorce. Somehow, he is still in the pulpit preaching. Truthfully, maybe one cheating scandal could be overlooked, but I don't really see me listening to the word from someone who I know isn't really practicing what he's preaching. But that's just me. Maybe if there was evidence that he really changed, sure. But I get it. Possibly some of the women in his congregation may be interested in him and would love to get a chance to roll around in his sheets. Possibly some of the men are okay with him and his antics because they feel it gives them license to do the same. Why hold someone else accountable for doing what they're doing when I really want to be doing what they're doing too? Maybe this is what some of the men are thinking. This way, when someone tries to hold me accountable, then I can just throw in the fact that the preacher is out here doing it, and if God is okay with him doing it, then why aren't you okay with me doing it? Child, please. I almost just cursed. Makes me wonder what the people in his congregation are really getting from him. Are they getting spiritually fed? I guess I may never know. The healing comes in when, child, I've got nothing. And that is so sad because I don't ever want to think of anybody as a lost cause. But in this case, I've got nothing. So let's keep moving. This pastor's actions seem to have had a domino effect on that church organization. When he got fired for having sexual relations with women who were not his wife, the floodgates apparently opened up. When people begin to dig and dig in your business, they don't stop until they discover every skeleton in the closet. And since this wasn't just a local small church, but quite the opposite of that, when people began uncovering his skeletons, they uncovered other people's skeletons as well. There are so many people who had a hand in all that occurred. Everyone needs to take accountability for their part in the things that occurred. The healing, baby, I don't really know because this thing was huge. So many moving pieces. I guess the healing will start with accountability. That would be the first step, I guess. Last but not least, I don't know if this pastor was doing a comedy show from the pulpit or what. The pastor was on stage. She was in the pulpit talking about interviewing friends, changing names on your light bill, and whether or not you live in a trailer park or a house. I'm not sure how that was part of a sermon. I don't know what the Lord had to do with any of it. The shade started within about 2 minutes or so of her walking up to the pulpit and getting the mic. And it lasted for about 4 minutes. She was going in. She says she has a great personality, but once again, was it a church service or a comedy show? Another thing I find problematic is the apology afterwards. The apology was fake, as most apologies are when people are intentionally offensive. Maybe her PR person suggested she should offer an apology. To me, it's like you said what you said, so stand 10 toes down in it. Don't change up what you said now because of the backlash from social media. So the healing. Honestly, I wonder what occurred when she was younger. As the saying goes, there was always a little bit of truth in every joke. Did her cousin have the light bill in her name? Did she used to live in a trailer park? The things that she mentioned, were they personal to her? This wasn't the first time she has offended people while standing in the pulpit. I guess 2 or more times can be considered a pattern now. But anyways, the healing comes when she examines the root cause of why she says what she says, knowing before she says it that it's offensive. Whew, this was a lot. But I want to go on record again saying that I am not a counselor, therapist, psychologist, etc. of any kind, licensed or otherwise. I'm none of those. I'm a regular person who was pointing out a few things and giving you my opinions pertaining to those things. Now on that note, deuces.